So I want to take a minute and talk you through the visual model for this fertilizer question. These squares represent 5 bags of fertilizer, and then we know that we need to divide it by 3 3/4. So we're doing 5 divided by 3 3/4. Okay, now we need to have a common denominator so we can divide into fourths. So what we have to do is we have to take this 5 and break it up into 1/4, which is what this middle picture shows here. Each 5 is divided into 4 pieces. So that's the same thing if you count them all up as 20/4. That's the same thing as 5. And then this picture on the right shows dividing 3 3/4 into 5. And you can see that 1, 2, 3 highlighted in blue, and then 3/4. Okay, so 3 3/4 goes in once evenly, and then there's some left over. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fourths left over, or 1 1/4. Okay, so that's what's left over when you're dividing. It's kind of like your remainder. So then you need to figure, okay, well, how does that impact the solution? Well, you're dividing by 3 3/4, so you need to know the relationship between 1 1/4 and 3 3/4. Okay. Now the thing is, if you were to take this 1 1/4 and multiply by 3, you would get 3 3/4. So 1 1/4 is 1/3 of 3 3/4. And another way to look at that, well, what if we make 1 1/4 out of the 3 3/4 that's highlighted? So we'll say, okay, I'll put a dot in each one of these, so that makes 1, and then plus 1/4. And here, let me change ink colors. And there's a 1/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's a 1, plus another 1/4, because we did 5 of those 1/4. And switch colors again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's another 1 1/4. So you can see that 1 1/4 goes into 3 3/4 3 times evenly. So that verifies that you have 1/3. Okay, so this is 1/3 remaining of the 3 3/4. So that means that your answer or your solution to this is going to be 1 and then plus this 1/3 over here. So it's going to be 1 1/3. So that means that 1 1/3 bags of fertilizer needs to be spread out over each square yard. You know, this is a visual way of doing division, and there's another way called abstract, and I'll talk about that as well. Okay, so let's say you want to do 5 divided by 3 3/4. Now we did have a visual model for this, but I'm going to show you the abstract calculation as well. So what you do here is, first of all, you're going to convert this mixed number into an improper fraction. Remember, the way you do that is you would do 3 times the denominator 4 and then plus the numerator of 3. So I'll recopy this 5 divided by, and then 3 times 4 is 12, and then plus 3 is 15, so it's going to be 15/4. Okay, now because multiplication is the inverse operation of division, you can actually do the reciprocal of this fraction and then multiply instead. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to do 5 over 1, just to make it easier, times 4/15. Okay, I wrote it as 5 over 1 because it's easier to see multiplying the fraction. You just multiply straight across here. Okay, so this is saying the exact same thing. 5 divided by 15/4 is the same as 5 over 1 times 4/15. 5 times 4 over 1 times 15. So that's going to equal 20 over 15. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and simplify this fraction. I know 20 is 5 times 4, and 15 is 5 times 3. So these 5's, they simplify out, and then you're left with 4 divided by 3, which is the same thing as 1 and 1/3. And so that's the same solution we got with the visual method, so you can see that both methods work very well.